Hello and welcome to Rajya Sabha Television. You're watching The Big Picture with me, Frank Pereira. The Doklam standoff is well into its third month and there are no signs to suggest that India or China is ready to withdraw troops from the disputed site. China is apparently losing support from big international players like the United States, the United Kingdom and Japan, but it is aggressively campaigning to win over Nepal. Bhutan and Nepal are the two countries that have formed a buffer between India and China. While Bhutan continues to be on the Indian side of the diplomatic divide, separating New Delhi and Beijing, Nepal has always looked for a better bargain from both its big neighbors. Nepal's Prime Minister Sher Bahadur Deoba is in New Delhi on a 5-day state visit, and India and Nepal have signed 8 bilateral pacts after comprehensive talks. Deoba has said that Nepal would never allow any anti-India activities from its soil. But he has not said anything on the Doklam standoff to suggest that Nepal has reconsidered its neutral stand on the matter. On this edition of The Big Picture, we will analyze the ongoing visit of Nepal's Prime Minister to India. Joining me on the program today are Bharat Bhushan, editor, Catch News, Kanwal Sibal, former Foreign Secretary, and Professor S.T. Muni, Foreign Affairs expert. I'd like to thank all my guests for joining me on this edition of The Big Picture. Ambassador, I'd like to begin with you. How do you think the 5-day visit of Nepal's Prime Minister, the ongoing visit, is going on thus far?
I think it's going off well as could be expected. There have always been big issues in our relationship, which has been subject to a great deal of ups and downs. And there are certain entrenched views in Nepal about India in many circles, including those who are ostensibly friendly towards us. And on our side, there is considerable criticism that we are not able to manage our relationship with Nepal as well as we could, and that we could be more generous with Nepal. During this visit, I note that there is a huge accent on connectivity. This has been one of the weaknesses of our relationship because I've served in Nepal and I know how difficult it is to get access to Nepal by road or rail or otherwise. And this time, I was quite impressed yesterday at a function at one of the think tanks where the Gadkari laid out all the various rail projects that he hopes to complete by the end of this year and some which would be completed next year, including some projects which would allow riverine commerce between India and Nepal. And then some of the agreements that have been signed or the joint statement refers to some oil pipelines and other things that would be built in due course, and the DPRs would be prepared and everything else. So I think we are looking at a weak area in our relationship, and this is important in the context of what China is trying to do in terms of building up a lot of connectivity
and infrastructure
with Nepal, including extension of the railway line to Lhasa. The road is already there, etc., etc. There are these power projects and water projects, many of which have not fructified in the past, but hopefully some progress would be made on power. Certain
idle power projects have been an irritant in the past, and that's something that the Nepalese would want to be addressed as soon as possible.
Well,
so any forward movement on that?
Well, you know, on the Pancheshwar and Kosi projects and this and that, some movement could be made, but we've gone through a lot of difficulties on this, and I'm not sure even in the changed environment we'll be able to go ahead with these projects within the timelines that we may have in view.
Sure.
But on the power side, there seems to be some forward movement. But basically, a lot of work will need to be done. Nepal will have to change many of its attitudes towards India and look at India with less suspicion. And we should do everything that is possible on our side not to raise those suspicions. But even when we don't intervene in the internal affairs of Nepal, the Nepalese politicians and political parties use the bogey of interference, real or imagined, to create misgivings in the minds of the Nepalese people, and that affects the overall level of trust and confidence between the two countries.
Let me bring in the other panelists into the picture as well. You know, Bharat Bhushan, as far as the irritants are concerned, do you believe that those irritants have been addressed in the summit-level talks that were held between Prime Minister Modi and Prime Minister Deoba yesterday, or do you feel that those will continue to exist?
Well, these irritants are not at the summit level. They are at the level of the people, at the level of their political elite. The Nepalese political elite, the Pahari elite, which virtually controls Kathmandu and Kathmandu's policies, hates India. It hates India not only because of the 5-month blockade, but because the Nepalese political elite and intellectual elite is very high on low cunning. They think they can play China against India, this country against that, this project against that project.
And this has been done for decades now.
It's been done for decades, but it's intensified because of the policies of this government. It is. If we say that India does not interfere in Nepal's affairs at all, I think that would be far from the truth. But India does interfere. Sometimes it facilitates things. The Maoists would not have come into the political process but for India. But ever since this new government came, this whole attempt initially to build religious links to this Maharudra Abhishek at Pashupatinath temple, then send the signal that somehow reinstate the king as a cultural head, not as a political or an executive king, but as a cultural head. And if somehow Nepal could be rescued and be converted into Hindu kingdom again, I think these were all misguided things. They came from ideology, not from India's national interests. And when that didn't work, and when Nepal went ahead and the Paharis had a constitution which actually virtually disempowered the Madhesis or gave them a bad deal, India could do nothing. By that time, the horses had bolted. And now we are unable to do anything with the Madhesis. You had a 5-month blockade, tacitly supported by India, if not actively. And then you've given up on Madhesis and their rights, and you're telling them, please, this is what happens in democracy. You must contest in elections, etc. So you had strategic assets or friends in the Madhesis. You've lost them. The Paharis were never with you, and even now they're not with you. The media is against you. The whole Back Off India campaign was run by English-speaking media and certain individuals there. We continue to fed them, and we will continue to do it because people think that these are the guys who are running Nepal, and you must please them. So basically, Nepal is essentially today anti-India, whether it's Paharis, Madhesis, because they think they've been they were loyal to India and India did nothing for them. They were friends, so that friendship has not been repaid. And it's a very, very difficult situation. In infrastructure, how can you match the Chinese? In 2016, $3.8 billion they pledged for infrastructure projects. For $8 billion, they're building, doing a feasibility study of a train link from Lhasa to Kathmandu. And what are we doing? Small time train links between Bihar and the Tarai. So there is no competition, and today China stepped in a big way. Sure. Only thing going for us is our cultural links and our friendships and the Gorkhas and the fact that we have traditionally been very good friends.
Is that enough though? Is that, Professor, I'd like to bring you into the picture now. Is there a growing anti-India chorus in Nepal? And if there is one, how do we address the problem? Because we've had ties with the Nepalese for several centuries now.
It's a million-dollar question which you are raising. First, I think let me share both the hopes, expectations and skepticism of both my panelists. In terms of this visit, let me say or throw on the table a couple of other points, particularly in the context of this visit. Firstly, I think it reinforces the tradition that Nepal Prime Minister's first visit should be to India. I am quite foxed at this tradition, but this is a tradition which has continued, and that is getting reinforced. In a way, it shows that Nepal is with us. Particularly, you mentioned, you very beautifully brought in the overall regional and other context, that Nepal is with us, but I'll come to the specifics. Now, what has this visit done? 8 MOUs signed, very well. Some of the projects which were pending for years are being expedited, as Ambassador Sibal said very rightly. Gadkari pointed it out to the Prime Minister, and we see it in the joint statement also. Very well done. Why have it been delayed? Out of the 8 MOUs, 4 are on the 2-year-old assistance which we offered to Nepal, which has not progressed an inch forward. And these MOUs are only for getting them ahead. The other 2 MOUs actually related to the 2 decisions a day before Deuba's visit were taken by the Indian cabinet. One is on the drugs and others, the other is on the Mechi bridge. Why were they pending all these months and years? One does not understand. So I don't think Deuba had to come to sign these MOUs. A secretary level officer from India should have gone to Kathmandu and signed these projects. But anyway, it is good that these MOUs have been signed, and I hope they progress. Now, coming to the context, there are two political contexts. One which you have underlined, the second what Bharat has indicated at. The internal context is that we want to see a combination or a coalition of the Nepali Congress, the Maoist and the Tarai people to go ahead. We were very keen that constitutional amendment should have come. The constitutional amendment failed 2 days before Mr. Deuba was to come here. Why did it fail? UML did not vote, and he, as Bharat says, UML is pitted against it. But somebody should explain to me why members of the Nepali Congress and the Maoists did not go to the parliament to vote. Nearly 20 of them did not go. The vote was lost by 48 votes. So 20 of them did not go. Who is responsible? Is Mr. Deuba holding his party with him? Is Mr. Prachand holding their parties with him? What is happening? I don't know. I hope after this visit, you know what Deuba has said in his last statement while going? He said, we will surely carry out these amendments when we have 2/3 majority. You would never have 2/3 majority unless there are coalitions. Now, this is a bad message so far as the internal coalition is concerned, or internal, what you call the inclusive democracy in Nepal is concerned, which Bharat has elaborated. Second is external context. In the external context, the Nepalese side has put it in no uncertain words that they don't want to take a position between India and China. Mr. Mahara, the foreign minister, has been on record of having said so. And so far as the Prime Minister is concerned, at the meeting which Ambassador Sibal referred, Mr. Paswan made a statement in which he brought in China. And he said China is suppressing Tibet, China may suppress other countries, Nepal included. Mr. Deuba made it a point to rebut him. Say very clearly, we have best of relations with China, we don't fear anything from China, we don't need anybody's support so far as China is concerned.
Sure.
Now, that being the message, I don't know the political context in which this visit should have been highlighted, can be highlighted, or the kind of projects or the agreements which we have signed. We really needed the Nepal Prime Minister to come to us and sign these agreements.
You know, there is a certain general election, Ambassador, in November, and KP Oli is desperately trying to win that election. Let's not forget that he is extremely close to China as well. So those elections in November are also going to be extremely critical, aren't they?
Well, yes, in the sense that if, assuming that Oli and his gang manage to come back to power, there'll be a major setback to our interests. Well, what we can do on the ground to prevent that, I'm not aware, but we should, I think, do everything possible to do that without bothering about whether this constitutes interference or not interference in the internal affairs of Nepal. We have every right to try by every possible means, legitimate means, to make sure that people who are supportive of strong India-Nepal ties are the ones who govern that country and not lobbies and interests which are linked to China and who are openly hostile to us. I'm not aware of how this will play out because of the highly divisive nature of Nepalese polity. And there are some who say that you can't rule out Oli, that he's making a comeback. I'm sure that people in government who are involved in our relations with Nepal, various agencies of the government, will play their role in shaping the events in Nepal. We have, despite what Bharat said about the disillusionment amongst the Madheshis, but we have a real concrete constituency there which we should be able to manage. It's not unusual that even in such circumstances, governments are able to play a role and mold opinion and use the means at their disposal to change sentiments. So what is it that we can do in terms of practical action on the ground? We should do so. And the Nepali Congress, despite the fact, is quite right in saying that the hill people, by and large, use the word low cunning. I will not use that, but I will not contradict what he said either. So even within the Nepali Congress, it's not as if they have been steady and unvarnished supporters of India. They play their own. They play their own games.
Right.
And the Maoists also are divided, and we have to also handle them in our own way. So it's a fluid situation. But I can't. Maybe the experts can tell you what the outlook is. But I think that to conclude, that Oli, if he comes back, would be a big setback to us, and we should do everything to prevent it.
Sure. You know, there's a certain Xi Jinping, the president of China, who's visiting Kathmandu in October. So we have to watch out for that visit as well, because there is a lot that he can bring to the table and offer the Nepalese.
They've already brought a lot to the table. So, you know, you are not going to be able to compete with China when infrastructure investment comes in to Nepal. But you should warn Nepal that, look, what Chinese infrastructure investment and assistance does. What has it done to Africa? It's put Sri Lanka into a debt trap. Does Nepal want to get into a debt trap? I mean, there are no free lunches, especially when it concerns the Chinese. But I absolutely agree with Ambassador Sibal that KP Oli coming back to power would be disastrous, not only for India, it would be disastrous for Nepal. He's a divisive personality. He is the one who has actually created all these problems with the people of Madhes. The Pahadis have always treated them badly. Here was an opportunity to be generous, to say, look, you are Nepalese citizens, because after all the Madhesis must look towards Kathmandu. They must not look towards Delhi, Lucknow or Patna. The future lies with Nepal, in a stable Nepal. Here was an opportunity. If he were a statesman, he would have behaved differently. He is a petty politician who looks at only his own interests and his party's interests. And he happens to be supported today by a section of Nepalese who are upset with India for a variety of reasons which I have already listed.
Yes.
So how the election goes, one doesn't know. As far as China is concerned, China will be a factor. It will not, you know, earlier the king used to play the China card and people would play the China card, and there was really no China card. Today, actually, there is a China card. So you have to take China into account and what China does there, and therefore have strategies which will counter China's influence, not in terms of money. You cannot match them.
And what could some of these strategies be?
Show friendship towards the Nepalese people, you know, including the Pahadis, but isolate the bad elements there who've run this campaign against India. We have not managed to do that. We don't make a distinction. You must make a distinction. You must identify who your friends are. Go whole hog in supporting them. Use your soft power. Give, you know, open up Indian universities to Nepalese students. You know, why should they have to pay in dollars? They pay in dollars. Why Nepalese paying dollar fee in India? It's crazy. They should be treated on a par with Indian citizens. If Nepalese can join the Indian army and the bureaucracy, why can't they go to our universities like our normal students? So do things which will make the next generation of Nepalese your friends. So even if you lose out something in the long run, you gain a lot in the long run.
Sure. You know, Professor, the Chinese have been extremely aggressive of late, and there are two tri-junctions in Nepal, just like the ones that we have in Bhutan, the Doklam issue. Do you believe that the next battleground is going to be those two tri-junctions?
Well, the one is Doklam, you are already having it. As far as Kalapani is concerned, the Chinese have indicated, Chinese media at least has indicated, that we will kick up a row there, and then what happens? So I don't know what the Chinese are up to so far as these border points are concerned. I still believe that they are not ready for, they are not capable of launching a war in the Himalayas. I still believe. And what they do, how they pressurize India is a different way, which is unfolding in various manners. But let me again bring a different point. We are worried about China, and rightly so. Nepal, Sri Lanka, what they do not do vis-a-vis China is of a secondary importance. The primary importance is that you have to cope with the Chinese intrusion and push into South Asia. All other countries, look, tell me one thing, if we are asking for the Chinese investment for a train from Delhi to Chennai, fast train, why would the Nepalese not ask for it? Why would the Sri Lankans not ask for it? Why would the Bangladeshis not ask for it? If we have the highest trade with the Chinese, how can we go and tell these smaller countries that you don't have any economic dealing with China? Therefore, China is a challenge for India. China is a challenge for India which we have to buckle ourselves up to see how to handle it. I see absolutely no indication in the policy as to how we are going to cope with this China. You question asked, you will need 2 hours for us to debate that. actually what are the options, and some of us can be listed.
Yes.
I can list some of them, but that's a longer issue. So the question is that dealing with these neighbors, with the China factor, actually China, it is our sense of internal insecurity that we are not able to cope with China, and therefore we want all these neighbors to behave vis-a-vis us in relation to China. It won't happen.
Sure.
It won't happen at all.
You know, it's that time of the program now.
Just one point on Olis. Don't be so scared of the Oli factor. Partly for two reasons. One, Oli continues to say, I am the best friend of India. Why are you not taking me along? He has a lot of hypocrisy. There is no doubt about it. But in the recent local elections, if you put all the seats together, Oli's party is not in absolute majority.
Sure.
It is the Tarai people who did not contest the elections. It is Nepali Congress and Maoist put together still have more votes than what Oli's party has.
Right.
So the real challenge within Nepal for these parties is to have their coordination better, which it was not there in the last election.
Right.
And if they have this coordination better, they can certainly face the Oli challenge.
You know, quick closing comments from all my guests, beginning with you, Ambassador. What's the way forward really for India-Nepal ties?
Well, I think the way forward is quite clear. This is what we've been discussing as to how to manage our relationship with them, support the elements in Nepal who are friendly towards us, make gestures towards Nepal in certain areas. I like the suggestion he made about giving them more seats in our universities, and I'm surprised. I didn't know that they're paying dollars when the rupee is convertible in Nepal. Our rupee is convertible in Nepal, and we have an open border, and they can come and work here. I don't see why the educational institutions have to demand that they pay fees like foreign students in dollars. So there are some of these things, in the medical area, connectivity, absolutely very, very important. On the water resources, we can move forward. If we can, by connectivity, tie up Nepal more and more in terms of access to India and Indian territory, the dependence on Nepal would grow, and our trade and commerce can increase, etc., etc. So far as the China factor is concerned, there is a limit to what China can do. After all, how much money can Nepal absorb, and to what end? Because these have to be economic projects. They have to yield economic returns.
Right.
And if they don't, and the economic returns can't be with Tibet. Whatever they may do, they can't make these projects economically viable based on interaction with Tibet. It's simply not possible.
Sure.
So it has to be with India, so we have the upper hand.
Okay. India has the upper hand, but, you know, how can we leverage it, Bharat Bhushan?
You have to get Nepalese to trust yourself. You have to tell them that Nepal is not India blocked. It's India open. That India's economic opportunities are Nepal's economic opportunities. You have to assure them there'll never, never, never be a blockade again, because you're India open, not India blocked.
Fair enough.
You have to win the hearts and minds of the Nepalese people. It's not very difficult. We've made some mistakes. Those mistakes need to be corrected.
Those mistakes can be corrected as well.
And
Professor,
admitted first.
Okay, Professor, close the show for us with your concluding remarks.
Well, I would say that China challenge is not very big in these countries still, provided we can match our delivery deficit. We don't deliver on what we promise. Give you one example in relation to this visit. June 2015, we promised them 1 billion for the earthquake relief. The first 4 MOUs have been signed today. Why? I don't understand.
Right.
And that too relates only to the grant part of it. The loan part of it, neither the Nepalese are coming forward, nor we have projects. We have, in the joint statement, we have said we must identify projects related to that.
Sure.
If you have delivery deficit covered, whatever you are promising, don't bother about 40 billion, 10 billion, 4 billion. Even if 1 billion you have offered, deliver it on time and efficiently.
Fair enough. On that note, we'll have to call it a wrap on this edition of The Big Picture. I'd like to thank my guests, Bharat Bhushan, Kanwal Sibal and Muni for joining me on the program and putting things into perspective for us. That's all the time we have today. See you again next time.